The United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
Привіт, Ukraine! People of Ukraine, this is your moment.
Народи України.
Your fight is our fight.
Ваша боротьба – це наша боротьба.
2017 will be the year of offense.
Рік 2017 рік буде ріком нападу.
All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Awesome. Welcome back to Wake Up Tucson. This is Jonathan Hoffman and Drew Heaton at Wake Up Tucson. We are so happy to be rolling into our last hour of the show here and are happy that we are joined by a gentleman by the name of Keith Knight. I was privileged to meet him at the Arizona State Convention, the Libertarian Convention, January 15th through 17th, and I found him to be an extremely intelligent, well-spoken man who is representing the Libertarian Institute, and we're just blessed that he's local here in Arizona. So I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity for my Wake Up friends out there to hear maybe a different perspective on the Russian-Ukraine situation and just where we are as libertarians in the anti-war situation. So welcome to the show, Keith.
Drew, you spoil me rotten with that introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I would love to hear from you specifically about Russia-Ukraine. And the work that you do with Scott Horton, because I'm sure people don't necessarily know who you could introduce this crowd to who Scott is, who you are, the Libertarian Institute, and antiwar.com. How about that?
Scott Horton is the director of the Libertarian Institute where I work. We basically try to collect a bunch of free material in podcast format, video format, article, essay, and try to give people a philosophical, historical, economic understanding from the libertarian point of view. Our general concept is we're trying to move towards decriminalizing all capitalist acts between consenting adults. So antiwar.com is something also Scott does. I'm actually not on there, but they also do terrific work as well. Getting into the Ukraine situation, I think one of the most important things is you can always say, well, the anti-war crowd is complaining about the U.S., what else is new? What's really important about the Russia-Ukraine situation is that even people who would generally be considered hawks, people like Pat Buchanan, who were referred to as Cold Warriors, who supported funding of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, invasions in Grenada, Nicaragua, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, even people like that were in strong opposition to expanding NATO because they saw it as an unnecessary provocation against places like Russia, mainly, more so than anything else, while Russia was in a position to become much more friendlier to the United States than when it was the Soviet Empire. I mean, for heaven's sake, if Kissinger is able to go to China and sit down with Chairman Mao, certainly Vladimir Putin is someone who we should be willing to sit down with and trade with. One of the most important quotes is from George Kennan. He is the intellectual father of the concept of containment or domino theory in the 50s. So this is the intellectual backing behind a lot of the Cold War interventions that the U.S. was in. And in 1997, he wrote to the New York Times and said, expanding NATO would be the most fateful error of American policy in the entire post-Cold War era. Such a decision may be expected to inflame the nationalistic, anti-Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion, to have an adverse effect on the development of Russian democracy, to restore the atmosphere of the Cold War to East-West relations, and impel Russian foreign policy in directions decidedly not to our liking. So the problem is, one, that the people who claim to represent me are expanding NATO unjustly. Now, we can have trade with these countries, no problem at all. The problem is the treaty that says an invasion of Budapest will be treated exactly as an invasion of Baltimore. This is Article 5 of NATO's treaty that if any of these nations are invaded, the U.S. now has to go to war on that nation's behalf. Look, the first time NATO invoked Article 5 in its 52-year history at the point was in Afghanistan. And after 20 years, trillions of dollars, tens of thousands of people with PTSD, thousands of civilians, the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 11 days. Even if we want to, we cannot take on nuclear Russia over the Donbass region. Absolutely not. We cannot get involved in this at all. That is the position of the Libertarian Institute.
Thank you so much for that breakdown, Keith. I would just really encourage people. There's so much to learn there at the Libertarian Institute. And my concern is, as I've been watching what happens on social media, my advertisement for Jonathan and I coming on today was me wearing a T-shirt that said, "Kill your TV," because I thought it was very interesting that people who over the last 2 years have had sort of this, I'm fed up with what social media and the media heads are basically telling me in all things about the quote unquote pandemic. And yet as soon as there was an invasion of Ukraine, it was, this is the narrative and this is the only narrative and you're forbidden to speak anything else about it. And I would argue that if we were putting our men and women in harm's way, that we need to do more than have a knee-jerk reaction to what the media is telling us, right? So I think we're going to take a quick break, and please hold on. We're going to be back with you. This is Keith Knight, again, with the Libertarian Institute, and there'll be more on the other side of the break. Thank you. That's right. It is time to be brave. Welcome back to Wake Up Tucson with Jonathan Hoffman and Drew Heaton, and we bring Keith Knight from the Libertarian Institute back on. Welcome back, Keith.
Thank you, Drew, for having me.
So did you have a comment or a response to my concerns about the media and how they're handling this?
Oh, my gosh. Well, one of the great sins of the media is they more or less have like this widespread agreement on we're going to pick a date, and that is the date that history began. Putin invaded Ukraine, and that's the start of everything. I mean, I get that. Anytime you're analyzing anything, you have to pick a starting point, but it's so ridiculously convenient. Let me give you two examples of why this is just absolutely ridiculous. If you look at Congressman Adam Schiff, who I certainly hope this audience knows very well, he was behind the major Russiagate hoax against Donald Trump. While on the House floor, Adam Schiff said in January of 2020, the United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here. Basically, this is in response to the coup that took place in Ukraine in 2014. A large percentage of the population of Ukraine, specifically in the eastern part of the places referred to as Donetsk and Luhansk, this is the Donbass region, they voted for the current president, a guy named Viktor Yanukovych, and they didn't like the new regime, just as if there was a coup in America, a lot of people wouldn't like whoever was set in their place. And these people were resisting the new regime. So there has more or less been a civil war in that geographical area in eastern Ukraine for about 8 years. Death estimates range from about 8,000 to 14,000 in the last 8 years. But to pretend that this is just totally out of nowhere, these are basically referred to as Russian separatists because they have more of an allegiance to Russia than they do the government of Ukraine. So just that context alone, that alone will tell us that it's not some black and white Putin equals Hitler. There is a large amount of dispute going on over here as to who's entitled to what. Let me just give you one more. This was in 2014. Lindsey Graham, Amy Klobuchar, and John McCain were in they flew over to Ukraine to explicitly support the, quote, revolution of dignity, the uprising against the current government there, which was democratically elected. Not that I'm a defender of democracy per se, because, you can still do bad things in democracy. Lindsey Graham said to a number of militiamen in Ukraine, Your fight is our fight. 2017 will be the year of offense. All of us will go back to Washington and push the case against Russia. So look, it's not like we were just being totally isolationist and nothing was going on in Ukraine. There's been a war there for 8 years, and Russia is responding to it totally disproportionately. Putin is terrible for all this stuff, which of course needs to be recognized. But I mean, the fact that the media doesn't give the smallest bit of historical analysis to explain that there's a reason behind this, just as, the U.S. would not let missiles from the Soviets be stationed in Cuba in 1962. They'd sooner go to war. Look, Russia has a problem with the West teaming up with a lot of countries that more or less surround Russia and siding with those governments who are very anti-Russian in general, not to mention half the people in the American government claim that Vladimir Putin declared an act of war on America by installing Donald Trump in 2016. So all of this needs to be taken into account, which the media doesn't. And that's why I am Team Kill Your TV along with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith. Are you able to make a comment towards the $8 billion that Trump sent to Ukraine, I believe? Are you able to make a comment on that? I'm just wondering this idea that, it's simply and only Democrat presidents that fund, fuel, or even sort of provoke these type of things. Can you lend any perspective to that at all?
Yes, I can. I was just looking at that. I want to quote it specifically. It was, I want to say, here it is. ABC News, Trump admin approves new sale of anti-tank weapons to Ukraine. The Trump administration first approved the sale of javelins to Ukraine in 2017. This is October 1st, 2019 on ABC News. So, yeah, this was one of the reasons Donald Trump was impeached. They had said that the deal he was making with Ukraine was he wanted to get dirt on Joe Biden in exchange for giving Ukraine money, weapons, etc. But there is a war party in Washington. It's not just one of the teams.
Right. Thank you for that. Jonathan, did you have a question or any input?
No. This is very interesting. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So I just would really encourage people to look up Scott Horton, who has both the Libertarian Institute and antiwar.com. I really encourage people who have recognized over the last 2 years that we cannot trust media to be telling us the truth, that all of a sudden we didn't wake up and this started this morning or, a few weeks ago, that there is history. And as you say, I love that. I appreciate that you point out that there is a war party, and it's on both sides of the aisle. And, famously, I think, or I would hope so, that, Ron Paul said that, we cannot be looking to just our party, there's a fault in either party, that they stop talking about problems when their president or party is in office, and we can't do that because our parties are not going to come to save us when our liberty is gone. And ultimately, this is what I believe all of these conflicts are leading to, whether it's a generated pandemic or a provoked war, is that ultimately we lose our liberties as Americans, and then we become even less of the shining light that Jonathan talks about us. We can't be that to the world if we ourselves have our hands dirty in these types of actions. So just before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, certainly, I agree with that point. If you look at the empires of history, whether it's the British Empire, the German Empire, Japanese, the Russian Empire before the Soviet Union, war brings down all of these countries because people just don't have the resources to allocate to both productive activities and destructive activities. So, it's vitally important. When God says, "Thou shalt not kill," we don't have some big exception for politicians and the Russian government being able to get away with atrocities on this scale, as terrible as it is the result of big government and not having double standards. It's Russian big government or Chinese big government or American big government. In every case, it's some people exploiting others through concepts like taxation, which, of course, Drew, if you tried to issue taxes, you would rightly be called a thief. Look, we need to allow people to opt out of these terrible things that they oppose. And when you have politicians swiping someone else's credit card with, no moral standard that murder's murder when they do it, they're going to commit these large-scale atrocities. So until we have this sort of libertarian appreciation along with this conservative appreciation of family, civilization, and the importance of cooperation, then we can expect more wars like this.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much for your insight. Please check Keith out at the Libertarian Institute. He is local here. Also go to the Scott Horton Show or visit antiwar.com.